This is We the Sales Engineers podcast, show 211.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. We work with customers quite a bit, and we don't know what customers are thinking. We can assume what they're thinking. So it's always good to have someone who's been a customer or who was an SE, became a customer, and went back to being an SE, which is the case today, come on and discuss what he went through, how he thought, and that's today's guest. My guest is Antoine Snow. Great guest. It was fun talking to him. It was so easygoing. We didn't really have much prepared other than the general topics. So it was great just having a chit chat with someone and asking him all the questions that I had, which I love doing anyways, and getting answers that help me think in a different way, and mainly because I've never been a customer before. I worked for a customer, but I've never been the person trying to buy something. So this was interesting. We talked about so many different topics, from learning, from being so much into someone's lane that they don't see outside, to learning to be a good leader. Great topics, at least in my humble opinion. And I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you are looking for help, this is a shameless plug for the hotline. If you're not aware of the hotline, go to wethesalesengineers.com and check it out. It's basically a service that I'm offering for people who need some additional help or want some additional help, want to level up their skills or whatever it is that they need help with. That's something we can talk about. So check that out, wethesalesengineers.com. This is show 211. So the show notes are going to be at wethesalesengineers.com/show 211. And let's jump into the show. Good morning, Antoine. How are you?
All right. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Did I say your name correctly, Antoine?
Yeah, Antoine. Yep.
Antoine. All right. Yeah, I'm Lebanese, so I tend to go French for some reason, although I don't speak French. I make up my own.
It's a French name, so understood.
Nice. Well, it's good to have you on the show.
Yeah, appreciate you inviting me.
It's my pleasure. So the most important question of the day is, what do you think of my whiteboard behind me?
I think your artwork is fantastic.
It's my kid's artwork. I just wanted to showcase it in case it's NFT.
There you go.
That's what NFT is, right? I'll sell it on the whiteboard. All right. The actual real important question is, who are you and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. So Antoine Snow, I'm a principal engineer and lead over at AvePoint Public Sector. Been in solution engineering for maybe 7 years in total. I'm trying to think. I gotta add it up, but it's been an interesting road. So I started off in solution engineering probably back in 2013-ish, 2012, maybe something around those lines. And interestingly enough, I took a break at some point in time and actually did some service ownership work. So it was interesting to be a SE and then be the customer, right? Actually be on the other side of things. And I realized that this is really what I wanted to do. So I came back and been doing this for almost 5 years at AvePoint. So.
All right. So the most general question in the world is, what did you take away from being a customer? Like, what helped you in terms of sales engineering?
Oh man. So being on the other side and really understanding what the process is, right? So I was at a larger SI, system integrator, and so got to understand, what does the decision process look like on that side, being the customer, right? You sit there, you get the demonstrations, you talk about it, and then you actually figure out how long things might actually take, how many steps you have to go through, who all needs to be pulled in. So coming back to this side of the fence, it's like, all right, who needs to be on this meeting? All right. I know it's not just your team. Go grab everybody. I've been there, done that already. Don't need to do this 3, 4, 5 times. Like, let's make sure we have a nice large group. Everyone who needs to see it sees it and go from there. So
okay. So that makes me think, like, when you were a customer and an SE would come in front of you and start like showing you the best thing since sliced bread,
Yeah.
How did you take it? Did you believe them? Was there apprehension, especially since you were in that role before? What were your thoughts?
Man, I was critical. I'm not gonna lie. I was critical. If you came in front of me and you didn't have a well put together, presentation, it doesn't even have to just be a demo. It could be, a little bit of both. But if you didn't have it together, oh man, I was rough. You didn't want to be in front of me because I've been there, right? So I've been on either side of the fence. But with that being said, for someone who did have everything put together and gave me a fantastic, like I was even that much more appreciative to kind of push it forward and things like that because I could appreciate the effort that went into it.
So, did sales teams like to sell to you, or did they want to bypass?
Oh, probably not. Probably not. No. I wouldn't have wanted to sell for me either.
Oh man. All right. And something else you said, like, hey, bring in a large group. So because we didn't want to do the same thing over and over. Sometimes that, like, for me, when I'm looking at that, it's nice to have a large group because you're killing everything in one stone, I guess. But also sometimes the diversity of the audience will stop you from being able to focus on like this person's problem versus that person's problem. If you have like 20 people and each one has their own problem, how did you manage that in large groups?
Man, so that's a really good point, right? One thing that I like about the larger groups, and you're right? So when you have different groups, it's interesting because you can focus on the business problem of each group uniquely. Where the problem comes in is where the different groups have different priorities that don't align and they don't realize it.
Yeah.
So when you have these larger groups, sometimes it can be a little bit of chaotic for the engineer, but if you take more of a consultative approach to it, you help them realize that, hey, you guys need to get on the same page. Because what you don't want is this group likes you, then this group likes you, and then you move forward and you're like, oh my gosh, this deal's probably going to come in. And then it's like, wait a minute, we got to sort our stuff out internally first. And now all of a sudden you have a stalled deal. So by having the groups together and getting through that dissonance early, it can help you in the long run. So
It's interesting at that point, like the sales team, not necessarily the sales engineer or the sales person, but as a team, we tend to become marriage counselors. Right?
that is a heck of an analogy.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're in different, they're in different groups, so they don't always talk to each other.
Yep.
They want the same thing. They may or may not share the same budget. And now you need to figure out what's more important to each one. And it would suck if it's not you, but it's better to find out early than late in the day. By the way, I'm doing most of the talking because you said your throat is hurting, just so you know. Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
All right. I said that joke before we started, so I thought it was too good not to repeat. Okay. Have you seen the business process change from one organization to another? Because you said understanding the business process has an impact. Is it the same business process everywhere? What does it look like from your perspective?
That's a good question. So business processes have a lot of similarities, but there are going to be differences or nuances depending on. So again, like I'm in public sector, my primary focal area and the clients that I deal with on a day-to-day basis are all, government agencies of some sort, but you have enterprise, and I'm sure for those on the enterprise side, even my colleagues who are on that side of the house say that things are different. In some cases, it can move a lot more swiftly once you pass a certain juncture, right? That juncture might be, security, super stringent security. People want to get their hands on it. They want to get in the weeds, really down and dirty. In other cases, on the public sector side, sometimes if you have a really good business plan, you go in front of them with a great presentation and you get past, one or two stakeholders, the rest is smooth sailing. So it all really kind of depends on, what type of organization you're talking to and understanding where you might need to put in a little bit more time, where you might, need to speak to certain individuals to get it going, understanding where your roadblocks might be in the overall process.
That's very interesting. So I used to work as a network design engineer in a previous life. And I noticed the big difference, like that I was a post-sales. That was a post-sales role. Someone buys a service from us and I provide that service. So it's not implementation, it's design of what's going to be implemented. Okay. And I noticed that for like small government or small like counties, small towns, they would want something and then they wouldn't. It was so slow that they wouldn't sign off on the design, even though it took me like a week to finish. They wouldn't sign off on it for like 3 years. At which point, a lot of new features came in, and now they want me to implement the new features. I'm like, but you didn't pay for these; you paid for those. Right? And as a post salesperson, I can say that easily. Like, hey, I did my job. Pay the company. I'm like, as a post salesperson, I don't get commission or anything. Whereas when you work for like someone like Verizon Wireless, it's always moving. Like, we need this now, and we have budget or we don't have budget, and just forget about it. And that's a big difference that I saw from a post sales perspective. And that brings me like to the business process for small government, like the people you're working with, public sector. How long is the sales cycle, and maybe we'll start with that. How long is usually the sales cycle?
It depends. So it depends from county to state to, federal, whatever that case is, but you're looking at roughly about 18 months
Okay.
for the most part.
So I've interviewed for roles where it's for the government, and one of the questions that I get asked by the hiring manager is, how are you motivated with longer sales cycles? Because you're not getting the commission right away. You're working on something for 18 months. I always thought it was not a very good question, because I mean, things are in the pipeline, things come in.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around how do you stay motivated to work on an 18-month sales cycle? What's your role there?
So I love the mission, right? So when you start talking about working in public sector, it's really about understanding, who are you working with, right? You're working with people who have different missions, that have different priorities, that have, in some cases, really cool things that they're doing. So I'm motivated by, well, we're all driven by the bottom dollar at the end of the day, but as we're going through it, it's what are they going to be using the technology for? That there's a little bit of pride with that, right? Helping them figure that out, helping see that in motion. And while I don't do a lot of post sales, I am involved in certain circumstances to kind of see it through, right? And that's kind of part of the reward. And that's how I keep going. It's like, I want to see this go through. I want to see how this large organization is going to be leveraging technology that I worked with them to design and solution and get it into production. So
okay,
it's an interesting, I'm probably an outlier.
well, this brings up like, based on the comment that I said earlier, where it takes a long time and new features come in, also new problems creep up in those 18 months. How do you manage that some other problems don't take priority over the problem you've been working on for 18 months? And what if the feature set changes, that you have a different solution now?
You take it in stride and you figure it out. I don't have a good answer for that one. It's because you're right.
Answer.
Right. So within 12 to 18 months, things will change. New functionality comes out, new problems arise. It's trying to get on top, get in front of a lot of those things in certain circumstances, or in others, if you feel like it might slow it down too much, maybe you just say, hey, this is phase one. This is what phase one will look like. Let's talk about phase two is after we get this situated. So sometimes it's helping the clients prioritize themselves and say, hey, look, what actually is necessary right now? Let's focus on the right now. And let's design a game plan for what the next 6 months is going to look like after that, next 12 months, and go from there.
So are you continuously demoing newer features for the same job, for the same opportunity, or like you decided this is the feature that or this is the feature set, the solution we're gonna use to solve your problem? Do you stick to that, or does it change as the cycle gets prolonged to 18 months?
Typically, it's the same set, right? So the way that we work is try not to be too focused on the individuals, but it's more of like, all right, well, what is the functionality that we're going to encompass? And from there, we can kind of put it together. A lot of times what we try to do is sell the concepts initially, right? Right. This is
Right.
either the platform, this is going to be the functions you want based off of the problem that you have or the functions you need. And then we can start plugging in specific things as we go. By keeping it broader early on and not so technical. And I think this is a problem with engineers sometimes, that we're very technical people, right? So we go in and we're like, oh, this tool, this program, this
Yeah.
app is going to be it. But really, it's like, well, what is the overarching, is it governance? Is it, backup? Is it networking? What is it? And then let's kind of plug in from there.
Which is very interesting, because I've had this argument with one particular salesperson where I didn't want to use product names because things change. I'm just trying to understand your problem before I recommend a solution. But the account manager kept telling me, use the product name, you need to brand it, you need to ingrain it in their mind. I'm like, I'm not marketing, I'm solving a problem. But there's a good point to it. Like, you want them to think of, oh, this problem, that product, not the competitor's product, because it's ingrained. How do you balance that?
it's it's a it's a it is it's a line. What and maybe this is just kind of my mantra or my motto. I want to be a bit more consultative, right? I want to make sure that everyone I speak to understands that I'm focused on trying to help them with the problem, not necessarily trying to shove a particular product down their throats.
Yeah.
And in doing so, like, I feel we serve a very different purpose, right? We want to be trusted advisors. We want the technical teams and functional teams, business analysts and whomever, to think that we're not to think that, excuse me, to know that we're there to really pay attention to them. And if we're constantly throwing out our product name at them, left and right, number one, that doesn't give us a lot of room to pivot in the case that things do
Yes.
change, right? Because now I've told you about this product and now something changed and now I tell you a different product name. You're like, well, wait a minute, that's not what we talked about before. So it doesn't allow us to pivot too much. And I don't think it's disingenuous at some point where people don't really think that you're there for them. So ultimately I would push back. That's my motto. I would push back.
No, I 100% agree with that. I was younger in my career, so I didn't know how to push back. I just felt it was wrong the way he was doing it. But so I played a happy medium of throwing out a name here and then, forgetting about it for like half hour to 2 hours. So yeah, sometimes it depends on where you are in your career. You can deal with it in different ways. I am curious, like, from a customer's perspective or from an SE perspective, we have the sales cycle, like, from discovery, selling, whatever. How do the customers have their own purchasing cycle? And like, that's how you understand the business process, and how does that affect the technology that we sell them based on that?
So when you say that, you're saying that, is there kind of like a checklist that as a buyer that they also go through at the same point in time?
Yeah, like they're looking to purchase something.
Yep.
We have discovery selling. They might have discovery, decision making, whatever. Well, yeah, kind of a checklist or a flow that they go through, or like evaluate three competitors, whatever. Are you familiar with that from a customer's perspective? How did you make a decision from a customer's perspective? And how, from an SE perspective, how does that affect the technology that we sell?
Yeah, so if you're a if you're a buyer and you really truly get your problem. So one of the benefits that I had with the org I was with previously is that from a business requirement standpoint, they were very on it. So it's easy to say, these are the requirements that we have, right? This is what we need. This is the gap we have. This is what we need to fill. From there, you go through, you evaluate 3 vendors. Typically, it's 3. Try not to get too large, right? You evaluate 3 vendors. You evaluate them against the requirements. Depending on how complicated it is, you might require a trial or a POC, or you might not. And then you kind of move forward with who else needs to be involved. Sometimes you try to bring them in early. If you think about the differences, so infrastructure teams, right? There might be a collaboration team and an infrastructure team. Well, those 2 teams need to be on the same page as far as whatever is going to be implemented. They're
Never
not
seen
always
that.
on the same page. So that's why you try to pull them in early and often. And then from there, you're able to kind of move forward with, is it a purchase? Is it a POC? What does this look like? And go from there. Now that's if you have it all together. A lot of times it's a lot more disjointed than that, but that's a typical process though.
Well, here's the thing. If you're the kind of customer that I might not necessarily want to work with. If you already know everything, then there's really not much of a point for an SE at this point. It's just coming in and showing you the things based on what you said. There's not much of a consultative role. Have you had SEs come in and try to change your mind about like, oh, this is not necessarily the gap, that's the gap, or maybe you should think about some other things? And how did you react to that?
I didn't quite let them. I told you I wouldn't have wanted to sell to me either. Just I have specific things that I need to know. Right. I have my list. We spent a lot of time on this list. I need these questions answered. I need to see this functionality. But on the other hand, I am that SE. I'm the one who's like, hey, have you thought about it this way and that and this, that, and the third. I've gotten thrown off myself, and I'm like, man, this is familiar, man. This is karma, isn't it?
Well, so if someone comes in, like if a customer comes in with a list ready for you, I find it hard to really understand their needs beyond what they're telling me. Like I already know what I need. You just answer the questions that I'm giving you. And in the end, I have no idea what their needs actually are. Just I've answered a bunch of questions. How can you make sure as an SE to understand the needs of customers like that or any other customer really?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is to just ask questions and not be afraid to ask questions, right? So I was a hard sell before, and that's perfectly fine. I admit that, I accept that about myself. But if you ask the right questions, I wasn't afraid to answer, right? So what's the situation? What is the project? What's the objective, right? You're asking me about this, that, and the third. Help me understand how this aligns to what you're actually trying to do, because maybe some context will help me make sure that I show the right things within the solution. You can't argue with that as a buyer, right? You want to see everything that's going to meet it. So if there's context you can provide, well, then by golly, I'm going to do it, right? But you have to not be afraid when you have those stick in the muds that are like, hey, I got this paper of this list. Let me, answer these questions. Don't be afraid to ask those questions and get some more clarification.
So what were, like, you already mentioned one question. What were some
Mhm.
questions that pissed you off where you just, I don't want to answer these questions?
I don't know if I got, I don't know if I've gotten any questions that pissed me off. That's a good question. I don't know if anyone's ever asked me a question during the process that pissed me off. I think that if anything, there were times where if I was treated as if I knew nothing, right? So sometimes we were in our field, right? We,
Yeah.
as engineers, we have our specialty, and sometimes we speak to customers as if they don't know anything, like they didn't do any research or whatever the case is. And in my case, I had been an SE before. So I'm not going to give out that information, but ultimately if I say, oh yeah, I have experience with X, Y, and Z, sometimes we just write that off. We're like, they don't really have experience in this. And then they talk to you and treat you as if you don't know anything. And it's just like this, look, man, I'm trying to buy something.
There was one SE at a previous company that shall remain nameless that many customers told the account manager, I do not want to work with this SE. His sole purpose in life is to make us feel stupid. And the guy was a CCIE, like, yeah. He was up there and he was very smart. And as someone in post sales at the time, he really rubbed me the wrong way. Like, especially as a junior, someone who's junior trying to learn, like, he would throw people under the bus from his own company as well. So it was just interesting how some SEs think they're they're there to show their superiority versus being kind of a servant to their customers. So yeah, I like that. Was there any time when you walked out of the meeting thinking like, man, this, like, I wish he asked me this question or she asked me that question? Or was it always like an okay experience with other SEs? What are some of the weaknesses actually that you notice as a customer from SEs?
Lack of confidence is a big one, right? So one thing that, and again, maybe this is going to be dependent on your segment, right? Are you in more of a mid-market side? Are you in enterprise? Are you in public sector? Like, who are you used to actually interacting with? Some people are only used to interacting with the technical, hands-on people. Some people are used to interacting with C-levels, right? Now, I was by no means a C-level or anything of that nature, but when the customer comes on with a certain level of confidence, sometimes it can intimidate certain engineers. And one of the weaknesses that I saw is, stand firm, right? Like you may not be the expert in all things of this subject matter, but you're at least the expert in the technology that you're there to present.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Oh, hopefully. So with that being said, stand firm. If customer is coming, is a little firm, again, a stick in the mud, I'll use that analogy again, stay confident in what it is that you're there to present. Of course, be flexible. We're here to be flexible. If they say that you're going in a different direction that they're expecting, pivot, but don't be weak. don't, that's one of the, because then I don't feel confident about the product. If you're not confident about what you're saying, I'm not going to be confident about the product.
So there's a thin line between confidence and making people feel stupid, which
correct.
How does one manage like not being weak, being confident? Like it's kind of a lot of things that we have to manage.
Yeah.
We don't want to piss off the customer, but we still want to be confident in our equipment. And if we kind of step back and try to understand it, it can be viewed as weakness. So how does one stick their ground without being offensive and all that?
Yeah, so let's clarify something, right? So stepping back and asking clarifying questions, in my opinion, isn't weakness. When I say weakness, I mean, from going from being able to speak directly to a lot of stuttering, a lot of being flustered, a lot of mishaps, just your presentation just kind of starts taking a pitfall because of the reactions. You're not getting the reactions you expected, so now all of a sudden your presentation suffers. Yeah. Maintain consistency. It's not weak to ask for clarifying questions. It's not weak to try to adjust your presentation. What it is if you don't maintain that same level of presence during the presentation. That's what, and that's a soft skill, right? That's not something that's, I think, easily trained. That's something that comes with experience and being put in in crappy situations and dealing with that. But that's something that I think everyone should be aware of. Engineers specifically should be aware of as they're going through it. Like, how did you change over the course of this presentation?
So I was part of a presentation where like we sell $1 million products, and, like we sell expensive products. And for some reason, we went into a meeting that was not very well qualified. And we're talking about like hundreds of gigs of data, whatever. We sat across a gentleman. He's like, I have a $5,000 tester that can just plug in and see if something is working or not. I want a competitor to that. And we had a product manager presenting that hundreds of gigs of data. Never stopped at any point to say like, oh, we don't have anything for you, or let's do another discovery. No, he just kept going. Well, this is what we have. Right? It wasn't weak. He was very confident in what he was doing, but it was completely off topic. And basically he didn't pivot. And that's a weakness, not necessarily a weakness of the brain. Like he was strong and confident. It was just a weakness in performance.
That's a great point, right? Yep. So being contextually aware, as you're bringing this up, you have to start thinking like, man, we have to pay attention to a lot.
Yeah.
There's a little, after a few years of doing this, you start to take for granted, I think, the skills, both soft and and otherwise that we have to have, right, in order to be effective. So no, it's a great scenario, great example.
And the fun part about that is I was there with the product manager, with the account manager, with my SE manager, and with the VP of sales, and we all witnessed. So from my like that was in my first year as an SE, and I'm like, I thought something was weird. I just couldn't put my finger on it. So it was a great teachable moment for me after we walked out. It's like my manager said, he gave me permission. You run into something like this, you close the presentation, you sit down and do another discovery, or at least a qualification because it was never done.
Oh yeah, no, every deal is qualified, right?
I have a video on my YouTube channel about qualification versus discovery, and there's like a 30-second skit which I'm very proud of myself. But if you want to check it out, out later. All right, so we like you mentioned the SEs we have to do a lot, and some of the misperceptions that I see that SEs comes in for the demo and then gets out. That's the role in the sales cycle. What are your thoughts about the SE's role in the sales cycle from beginning to post sales?
Oh man, I hope some of the sellers I work with see this. All right.
No, hey, I'll send you the link. You can share it.
Yeah, we are co-owners. All right, we're in there with you. Now, I do understand that there's going to be a division of duties, but that's to be expected. Ultimately, when we're brought in, we are now running this with you from the time that you bring us in to the time that this thing closes. And even after that, for the most part, at least I know within our organization, we're part of the handoffs, right, to all of our post-sales teams. And in some cases, we're going to stick around, just, fly on the wall after that to ensure success, to see what's going on, and any touch points that we can have after that fact, in order to stay relevant. Because you would be surprised how many, when you do that and people see you, sometimes they'll bring you deals. I've had customers email me and say, hey, Antoine, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. I know you guys do it. But can we talk some more about it? Send that straight to the A and like, look at that, right? Because you maintain that relationship. But we are co-owners. You don't just bring us in for a demonstration. That's not what we are. We're not demo jockeys. At least that's the goal, right? We are there. There's a different perspective that SEs can bring to these deals that I think sellers oftentimes take for granted.
Here's the thing. I hear this term thrown out a lot by salespeople. Stay in your lane. Everybody has their lane. If you had stayed in your lane, you probably would not have sent that new opportunity to the account manager.
Yeah. Like, man, this is BD's job.
Yeah, our lanes overlap. Like, yeah, sure. There are some clear rules. I will never talk about money unless given permission to anchor. Right? Like, I will never negotiate. But I've as an SE, I've talked to my account manager, and we've decided, like, hey, if they ask how much would it cost, like, I don't know, like, I know some other customer bought it for like $2 million, right? So to anchor high, but like, hey, you can always talk to the account manager and see what they give you. I'm just the SE. I don't know, right? So if the account manager is okay with it, or if they encourage it, we do that. But there's so much when we're talking about money. If SEs do a crappy job in selling, doesn't, like, now we're selling on price, right? We're discounting the life out of it. But if we don't talk about money, at least in terms of how much money it saves you, how much time it saves you, how much complexity it saves you, sure, I'll stay in my lane. You talk about that and see if they believe you.
Yep. ROI. We could definitely talk about ROI. What is the return in context of whatever the larger problem is? I agree. I tell my team this. I don't speak dollars and cents. That is because you don't want to be held responsible for that, to be honest. But I'm there. So typically when the sellers are crafting what is the proposal going to look like from a pricing perspective, things like that, I'm typically involved in that, or at least I do a lot of the review on that, because sometimes we can say whether or not it makes sense, whether it doesn't. In some cases you can challenge, right? If you know that you're pitching something that is of high value and that is the response you've gotten, you don't necessarily need to over discount it because this, this, that, and the third. So there's always good, healthy conversation that can be had from that.
Yeah. And one big thing that I see is sometimes, the account managers are afraid not to discount because the competitors might have something similar, right? As an SE, it's your job to know if the competitors have something similar.
Exactly.
So if you stay in your lane, you'll just not make your commission, or you make less commission because now you've sold for less. So, I mean, don't run into the car next to you, but it's less about lanes. It's more about like Venn diagrams. There is overlap, right? We
Yeah.
do talk to each other. We're part of the same team. And that also brings me like from the post-sales side, I work pre-sales and post-sales, or the SEs in my company work pre-sales. We don't have a customer success team.
Okay.
A lot of companies have customer success teams, and sometimes there's also each of them staying in their own lane, no communication. How do you work with customer success teams and like implementation and services teams?
And I love customer success. So we have services team. We also have customer success teams, and so we use the terminology virtual account team, and that's really to highlight all of the disparate members of the org that may be working on a particular opportunity or an account. And so we love to kind of bring them all in. Sorry, you were going to say something there?
No, I was just taking it all in.
Got it. Yeah. So when we close something, so the SEs, we don't price the solutions or software specifically, but we will price services. So we scope services, we price services. So a lot of times after the deal is done, we are going to hand it over to the PM and to whomever is going to be doing the implementation. We'll explain to them why the SOW was written the way it was written. We'll explain to them why it was priced.
Is the PM a product manager or project manager?
Project manager, excuse me. Yeah. No, good clarification there. So the project manager. So we'll explain, why things might have been priced there. Are there any things that you need to worry about? For instance, public sector, do you need clearance or not? Are there cleared resources required? Is on-site, which is not a thing these days, but it was on-site delivery required.
Might happen again. You never know.
Yeah, it might. So those are the types of things that we would do. And then again, we want to be there during kickoff and whatever else we can be a part of from there. Customer success, we're close because if there's an issue, if there's a need, right? Customer success needs to know why did they buy this, and what value do we want them to continue to see in this? If there's any new features coming out, they should know about it because it might align to this goal or whatever the case is. And a lot of times customer success might need to pull us in, right? Again, to be like, hey, can you show the value of this? Or they're not, new stakeholders, maybe they didn't get a technical account manager, but we really want to make sure that this customer is successful. And I mean, it's a good relationship because customer success brings a lot of new revenue a lot of times, a lot of great, either upsell opportunities or, securing renewals that might not have otherwise happened. So I don't know, the overall virtual account team concept is very helpful, really supportive. It's a good supportive structure.
Post-sales leads to pre-sales.
Yeah, it's cyclical.
Yeah, I mean, if you sell the customer something and they never implement it, they're not going to buy anything new from you. You're never going to have the chance to upsell them. Or if they buy it, they implement it, and then the support sucks. If there's something new, they're never going to buy from you, which is why customer success is so important, not just in like renewing their own product that they have, but in upselling and finding new opportunities. So I like that. Yeah. So Antoine, we're about to jump to the not so fire round. But before we get there, I want to ask you, is there a question you wished or hoped I would ask you? Or do you have any questions for me?
No, this is great conversation. So I'm good.
Well, it's not over yet. There's still the not so fire round, as the name tells you. It's not so fire round. So 4 questions I ask almost every guest, and I would love to hear your thoughts around it. So,
all right.
Question number 1 is, what do you love about sales engineering in general?
What I love about it and why I came back is going back to that concept of helping clients with their mission, right? Understanding like every customer is not necessarily the same. Let's put it that way. We love to say, oh, we've seen it before, we've heard it before, but there's always going to be uniqueness behind it. And every day is not the same as an SE. And that's what I love about being a solutions engineer. And that's why I came back to the role.
Nice. The second question is, what would you change about how either the role is viewed today or what the role entails?
That's an interesting one. So I would think that at every organization, I've been SE at I want to say about 3 different organizations now, and the roles are different. I've gone from being an SE that was considered a more of a demo jockey, right, to the organization I'm at now where SEs are a lot more valued. So that one's a little tricky. But as far as how it's viewed, I think this goes back to your question about the perception of where we fit into the overarching cycle, right? Once a deal is qualified, we should be a part of it from the time of going into kind of deeper discovery to the time that this ends. And I think that that should be respected and viewed the same across. So the perspective of us just being there for demos, I think, is what needs to change.
It's interesting. Are you tied one-to-one or one-to-many?
One-to-many.
So I'm one-to-one, or at least I was. And the issue that arose from that is I was involved in the sales cycle before it was even qualified. So, which was interesting, but that's a different story. All right. Question number 3 is there a resource you recommend for your SEs to read, watch, listen to?
There isn't. I do read quite a bit, but the things that have helped me, I think, the most have been sales trainings, ironically enough. So one of the things that we should remember as SEs is that we are sellers. We're technical sellers, but we're still sellers, and there are soft skills, different ways to ask questions, and things to kind of consider when you take these sales trainings, right? We can take our certifications all we want, our network certifications, our Microsoft, our Amazon, our Google, whatever that might look like, and be technical. That's fine. But one thing we need to kind of keep in mind is, what does it look like to really get through to the customer, ask the right questions? So one thing that we did most recently was force management. So that type of a training or something similar to that, I think, is extremely beneficial for engineers to participate in.
Nice. I've done solution selling training. That was amazing. I've done challenger training, not so much, at least in my opinion.
I haven't done challenger training, so I'm not familiar.
Well, I don't know. Challenger training, I find it very useful for the first meeting. And then beyond that, you go from challenger to consultative. Like, there are some times we need to challenge our customers, but it's more of a consultative role, challenging them as a consultant rather than challenge them as like, okay, buy from us because everybody else is. At least that's what I got out of it. It was online, so I don't know. Maybe I can ask the right questions. All right. Last question of the not so fire round is there a habit you're working on today to improve either in your personal or professional life?
A habit. Let's see. Something that I've been personally doing from kind of moving into more of a leadership role is just being more aware of the rest of my team. Let's put it that way. So what do I mean by that? Is that oftentimes as high performing SEs, we get very laser focused on our business.
Yep.
And a lot of times what we do is we miss the opportunities to really do kind of like what you're doing, how you're inviting people like myself and others on to share a lot of this knowledge. Well, I have team members that I could be doing that with as well, right? To try to help them and help the business as a whole. So one thing that I would always kind of recommend is really just being a part of the larger team. Don't be so lazy focused. Like, all right, I got to get my deals done, working with my reps. I'm just here. I'm in my lane and I'm doing, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, but got to bubble it up. When you have great experiences, when you have great case study situations, share that, right? and that's something that I struggled with and was constantly working on. And as I became more responsible for others, it really helped me open up a lot more and be like, oh man, I can help out here. I can jump in here. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I do have a follow-up. How, if you were so focused on your own lane, how did you get more how did you become more responsible for others on the team?
It was so my boss actually really started talking. Was like, look, you know a lot, you have seen a lot, you know, you need to share. And not necessarily just like sharing money or anything like that, but like you need to share this knowledge. Like you need to really kind of just take a step back and really say, like, so and so over here, like you're really good at this topic area. You know, this person's been asking about it in this forum. Have you seen it? Oh man, no. So it was really kind of being told about myself, if that makes any sense. And when he started that, I was like, you know what, you're right. And so this was around the time that I was a senior is when he told me that. So I really worked on that through and through up until, you know, getting into the principal role. And even then I wasn't perfect at it, but I'm doing, you know, I was doing the best that I can. And now that, you know, I've been made responsible for more individuals, it's something that I'm being extra cognizant to at this point. But I had to be told about myself.
That's amazing. Like, so, but you didn't become a principal until you did those things.
Correct.
It's a lot of people have the perceptions like, oh, give me the promotion and then I'll do it. You had to kind of do it and then prove yourself.
Show and prove.
Yeah,
Show
and
and prove.
I'm writing a blog about, like, there's a lot of individual contributors. There's a lot more individual contributors than there are leaders because, you know, it's just the nature of thing. And a lot of times people think as an individual contributor, we cannot be leaders, but we can. You just showed it. I mean, you were a senior, but you were not leading until your boss told you about it, right? So, and then you started being able to see and now lead the team as an IC, which then got you promoted to kind of a leadership role. So that's amazing. That's nice. All right, Antoine, this was amazing, and love to talk to you again at any point in time. Any last words before we head out?
No, this has been fantastic. If you have any other topics and you're like, man, I think Antoine would be a great person to answer this, you know, feel free to chat with me at any time. This was a great experience for me as well, because, you know, I was just talking about giving back, right? So I felt an opportunity not just to give back to my team like I've been doing, but to the larger SE community. I feel like we're a little bit disjointed as a whole. So I appreciate you for what you're doing and getting people like myself out there to talk to people. So
amazing. Well, that's a great way to end the show, Antoine. So I guess with that, for Antoine, this is Ramsey signing off. Thank you, Antoine, for coming on. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. This is show 211, so I'm always flabbergasted, which is a word that I enjoy using on occasion. That this is in fact show 200 and whatever. It's been a great experience for me to actually do this and to talk to people like Antoine, because everybody has their own knowledge, and Antoine was really great at actually sharing that information easily. Like, it was easy for him to provide whatever information that I wanted from him. So this was a great conversation, at least for me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, what was one nugget that you took from it? That is something that I'm always curious about the people listening to the podcast. What did you enjoy about it? So let me know, whether through like comment on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever. Send me a direct message. I don't care, as long as you tell me where you got that information or what information you found most interesting. Also, if you think this is going to be useful for anybody, make sure to share it. Let people know that this podcast does exist. Another way you can do that is by putting a rating or review on whatever platform you use it for. And check out the hotline. This is becoming too much of a plug, so I'll just leave it there. I really hope you guys enjoyed the show. So I will see you next time. With that, this is myself signing off for myself. Bye.